A single arrow ended the Viking Age. The man who took that arrow to the throat was Harald Hardrada, the Hard Ruler, King of Norway. But 15 years before that arrow, he was a nobody, a defeated teenage prince running for his life through Swedish forests. What happened between those two moments? He became the richest, most feared warrior in the medieval world. And then he gambled everything, his fortune, his army, his life, on one final prize. Our story begins in 1030. Harald was 15 years old when he raised 600 men to fight alongside his half-brother, King Olaf of Norway. They marched to Stiglestad to reclaim Olaf's throne. The battle was a massacre. The total solar eclipse darkened the sky. Both sides saw it as an omen. They were right. Olaf died. Harald took an arrow and barely escaped alive. He hid on a remote farm while his wounds healed. Then he fled over the mountains into Sweden. Here's what most defeated princes would do: accept their fate, fade into history. But Harald looked at his situation and made a calculation. To win a kingdom, he needed 3 things: money, a reputation that couldn't be ignored, and a royal marriage. He knew exactly where to find all 3. Around 1031, Harald traveled east to Kievan Rus, basically medieval Ukraine and Russia, ruled by a prince named Yaroslav the Wise. There, Harald met Princess Elisif. He asked for her hand in marriage. She said no, or rather, her father said no. Harald was a landless refugee. Why would a princess marry him? So Harald made a promise to himself: I'll come back so rich and famous that she can't say no. He took 500 warriors and sailed south to Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire's capital. To the Vikings it was called Miklagard, the Great City. And it was everything they'd heard. The richest city in the Christian world, gold everywhere, advanced technology, 1 million people living behind walls that had never fallen. Harald joined the Varangian Guard, the emperor's elite mercenaries. Think of them as the Secret Service, except they carried 2-handed Danish axes and were famous for being terrifyingly effective in battle. For the next decade, Harald went everywhere. He fought Arab pirates in the Mediterranean. He campaigned in modern-day Iraq along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, capturing 80 Arab fortresses. He invaded Sicily. He crushed a Bulgarian uprising so brutally they called him the Bulgar Burner. Some sources even say he cleared bandits from the road to Jerusalem so he could visit the holy sites. He was so good that he became the commander of the entire Varangian Guard. The most elite fighting force in the world reported to him. And here's the brilliant part. The Varangians were the highest-paid mercenaries in the Byzantine army. Harald was getting rich. Plus, there was this tradition called palace plunder. When an emperor died, the Varangian Guard could go through the imperial treasury and take whatever they could carry. But Harald didn't keep his fortune in Constantinople. That would be stupid. Byzantine politics were deadly. Emperors got overthrown all the time. So he did something genius. He shipped his gold north to Yaroslav in Russia for safekeeping. Eventually, his success made him too powerful. He got arrested. The charges vary depending on who's telling the story: embezzlement, defiling a noblewoman, political threat. The sagas say he escaped by blinding the emperor and sliding his ship over a chain blocking the harbor. Historians think that's exaggerated, but the core truth? He escaped Constantinople in 1042 with probably the largest personal fortune any Viking had ever accumulated. He sailed back to Russia, collected his treasure from Yaroslav, and asked Princess Elisiv to marry him again. This time, she said yes. He'd done it. He returned from exile with legendary wealth, an unmatched military reputation, and a royal wife. Now came the final step, going home. His nephew Magnus ruled Norway. Harald showed up with ships full of treasure and an army of veterans. Magnus made a deal. We'll share the kingdom if you share your gold. 1 year later, Magnus died mysteriously. Harald became the sole king of Norway. And he ruled like he fought, brutally. He crushed every rival, broke the power of regional lords, forced a unified kingdom into existence. They called him Hardrada, hard ruler. One German chronicler called him the thunderbolt of the north, and a pestilence whose savage wildness surpassed all the madness of tyrants. But it worked. He created Norway's first real coin economy, boosted foreign trade, spread Christianity, brought stability. There was just one problem. Harald thought he deserved more. He spent 17 years trying to conquer Denmark. Annual raids, burned cities, naval battles. In 1062, he won a massive naval victory at Nysa and destroyed the Danish fleet. But the Danish king escaped, and after 17 years of war, Harald had gained nothing. In 1064, they signed a peace treaty that just restored the old borders. So, Harald, now 51 years old, looked for a new prize. In January 1066, the English king died childless. 3 men claimed the throne. Harald Hardrada was one of them. His claim was weak, based on an old agreement between his predecessor and a long-dead English king. But he had an ally, Tostig Godwinson, the exiled brother of the new English king. Harald Godwinson wanted revenge. Harald Hardrada wanted a crown. In September, Harald launched his invasion. Over 300 longships, between 10,000 and 15,000 warriors. On September 20th, they destroyed the northern English army at Fulford. York surrendered. Victory seemed certain. Harold's army relaxed. On September 25th, they marched to Stamford Bridge to collect hostages. It was warm. Many left their armor back at the ships. Then they saw it. Sunlight glinting off thousands of shields. King Harald Godwinson had force-marched his army 185 miles in 4 days. The Vikings were caught completely off guard. A single Norwegian held the bridge alone, killing 40 Englishmen before someone floated underneath and speared him from below. The battle lasted hours. The unarmored Vikings were butchered. An arrow found Harald Hardrada's throat. He fell. Of the 300-plus ships that came, only 24 were needed to carry the survivors home. Harald Hardrada's death at Stamford Bridge is considered the end of the Viking Age, the last great Viking invasion, the last of the old-school Viking warrior kings. He was 15 when he lost everything, 51 when he gambled it all one last time. 7 feet of English ground. That's what they offered him. And that's all he got.